Greetings, film fanatics. Filmholmes here, and welcome to another rendition of Too Many Movies. I have now done 50 episodes of Too Many Movies with Filmholmes, which of course is me. And it's gone by fairly quick. The show started basically me reviewing movies and doing skits. I wish I could keep doing that. Unfortunately, I couldn't. But the main premise of the show, if you don't know, is for me to go through my collection and watch movies that I haven't watched yet. I've collected, thousands of movies that I want to see. And more than likely in my lifetime, I'm never going to watch all of them, but it's still a fun thought. And I'm still collecting because I want to see everything as much as I can. And I love to talk about movies. I'm not a film critic, I talk about movies from my heart and from my gut and from my soul because, I am a filmmaker. And if a movie touches me, even if it didn't touch anybody else, I want to talk about it, and I want to explain, how it touched me, why it touched me. I want to point to a doll and say it touched me here, But in this case, it felt good, But that's what the show basically was, and for about 5 episodes, and then I stopped. I came back, and now I just talk. I don't edit these down. I just talk. And I said in my last video that before I went back to doing what I wouldn't say do best, but just what I do, I wanted to give a list of my favorite films. And I finally got it down to 20. Now, you're probably thinking like, oh my god, he's going to do a video of 20 of his favorite movies. Well, here's the thing. I have more than that. But I was able to narrow it down to 20. Because these are the movies that made me really love film and made me want to study filmmaking and learn more about it. How did they do that? How did they do these things? These are the 20 films that did that to me, that made me want to get into filmmaking, made me want to make my own films, that inspired me. But this isn't going to be a super long video. This is probably going to be the longest part, me just explaining everything, because God forbid I do anything, short. I'm just going to do a short summary of why I like the film and how it inspired me, and it's not going to be in any particular order. It's not going to be like, 20, 19, 18. It's just going to be the list that I made. The first 2 are going to be my first 2 favorite movies, and a lot of these, including the first 2, I've already done full reviews on. And the rest of these, I would love to do full reviews on them, one day. So they're just going to be quick, short little summaries. So I'm going to go ahead and get to it. The first 2, for the few of you that watch this show, you already know. I'll do a very quick summary of both, why they inspired me, why I like them, and then I'll get to the other 18. And most of them will probably make sense. One will probably not. And I'll try to, mention when the movie I'm talking about I've done a full review of, just so you can maybe go and watch it to hear my full thoughts. But anyway, here are my top 20 favorite films so far, the top 20 films that inspired me to love filmmaking, to talk about it, and to be a filmmaker. So let's get to this list. Arthur, I just did a review of this not too long ago, so watch that if you want. But Arthur is my favorite comedy film of all time. It is. It's probably not one of the best comedic films of all time, but there's something about it. It's charming. You can tell there was a good amount of improv from Dudley Moore. The performances are beautiful. The story isn't extravagant, but it's different. But it's just so many great one-liners, such a wonderful script. It's well directed, and it really made me want to make a comedy of my own. And it's still, as many comedy films as I love and make me laugh, this is the one that still makes me laugh the hardest. Shawshank Redemption, I've also done a review of this, so go and watch that to hear my full thoughts, but it is my favorite dramatic film. And mainly because I can always watch it and be enthralled by it, by the characters, by the story. Such a well-written script, so beautifully directed. I still feel it's a very underappreciated film because it came out when Forrest Gump did in '94, and Forrest Gump ruled the world. I do love Forrest Gump. I'll do that on the show one day. But Shawshank, there's a magic to it. And it made me go, I want to make a film like that. It may not make a lot of money, but it will be remembered. And that's what Shawshank is to me. Blazing Saddles, my favorite Mel Brooks movie. I just reviewed Young Frankenstein a little while ago. One day I want to do all of Mel Brooks' movies, but Blazing Saddles is my favorite. To this day, it is so just funny. And what they do on the subject of racism to make that funny, to make it entertaining, but to also prove a point. But it showed me, satire, and how beautiful it could be, and how brilliant it could be. Mel Brooks is just a genius, and this is just my favorite film, and I could watch it any day of the week. Airplane, and I promise eventually we'll get to something besides comedies, but comedy is my favorite genre. Airplane, it's another satire movie, and it's done so brilliantly. And oh man, what can you say about it? The one-liners, the characters, it's just, I can't think of anything in the movie that doesn't work. I can't think of one joke that falls flat. Everything is just so beautiful, and you just keep watching it over and over again, and you find new jokes and new moments that you had missed before. And I didn't say this about Blazing Saddles, but like, that film is important, not just to comedy, but to film. Airplane is also important because it shows how silly a movie can be, but also be memorable. So it's like, I want to make movies like that someday. And that's Airplane to me. John Carpenter's The Thing. I did a review of this recently for the month of Halloween, but it is my favorite John Carpenter movie. I love the majority of his movies, but The Thing, and it's my favorite horror movie. Thriller. It's just the special effects, no CG, all practical. It still creeps me out. I love the atmosphere. It's just, everything about it is something that I want to make someday, if possible. But I know I'll never be able to do it as good as The Thing. I still think a very underrated movie, but it's hard to not enjoy it every time I watch it. How can you not enjoy John Carpenter's The Thing? LA Confidential is my favorite cop movie, and the script is so tight. It's based off a book, but the characters are memorable, the dialogue is memorable, the setting is memorable, but it's a good mystery, and I think it's hard to explain why this movie works. It's just so good. They paid great attention to the time period it's based off of in the 50s, and the characters are very believable. The story flows well. I'll do a review on it someday, but it's like a period piece that to me is one of the greatest films ever made. Goodfellas. This is my favorite mobster movie. There's one more on the list that's a very close number 2. This is certainly my favorite Martin Scorsese film, one of my favorite directors. What can you say about Goodfellas? It's a film that gets better every time you see it. It's so memorable, it's violent, it's kind of gritty at times. Oh God, Joe Pesci, how can you forget him? Ray Liotta, Robert De Niro. I mean, the cast, one of the best casts I've ever seen in a movie. So believable. It was Sopranos before Sopranos, and to me, it outdid it's the best mob movie ever made. And there are a lot of good ones, but Goodfellas is something that I still watch all the time because the direction, the writing, the performances, it all comes to make a nearly perfect film. Rocky. Of course, the first one. I have reviewed this as well as every other Rocky movie and Creed, so you can watch that video. But Rocky is the first time I remember being young, watching a movie and going wow, this is a movie. Like, it wasn't, a cartoon or something. It was a film. And I got that. I grasped that even at a young age. And knowing the backstory of Sylvester Stallone, writing the script, how he was struggling and how he held out so he could star in it, it's not only is it one of the best movies ever made, the backstory is one of the best success stories ever in Hollywood. And it's inspiring. And all of that just made me want to really try in filmmaking. But still one of my favorites. I watch this movie all the time still, and it's still my favorite Rocky movie. The Dark Knight. I wasn't sure if I wanted to put this one on the list, but it still is one of my favorite movies. It's my favorite Christopher Nolan movie. I do love him as a writer-director. He's so good. He's kind of repeating himself a little bit, but it doesn't take away from his brilliance. But The Dark Knight really showed what a comic book movie could be. And I wish DC would get on it with their newer movies and learn from it. But, there are parts of it that doesn't it's 2.5 hours, but Heath Ledger is the Joker. But not even that, the story flows so well, and it tells a great Batman story. And it's dark, and it's violent, and it just has you on the edge of your seat from the beginning to the end. When the Joker first shows up at the beginning to the last scene, it had you hooked for 2.5 hours. And I have so many favorite scenes from this movie, but it's one I've rewatched probably 30, 40 times. I mean, from the direction and the dialogue, it's not a perfect movie, but it showed me, like, wow, this is what a good adaptation can be. It's not the perfect adaptation of Batman, but you can take another idea and improve on it in some ways, or just make it really good. And that inspired me, like, one day if I need to do an adaptation of something, hopefully I can do it half as well as The Dark Knight. Clerks and Clerks 2. I reviewed both of these when I reviewed all of Kevin Smith's movies. I'm kind of cheating here a little bit, but both movies mean something different to me. I mean, they're on here because, Clerks, one of the best independent movies ever made, and one of the best movies ever made, quite frankly. And Clerks 2, I think Clerks 2 is a better movie in terms of its structure. But Clerks is more revolutionary because of its dialogue, how simple it was, but how unique it was as a film. And an old girlfriend had gotten me, when I first got into filmmaking, the Clerks 10 DVD box set. And I finally got to see Clerks for the first time, and also a documentary on there. And I love documentaries about filmmaking, but called The Snowball Effect, The Making of Clerks. And it inspired me. And it really got me rolling and making online videos and trying scripts and writing scripts and doing filmmaking. And Clerks 2 did the exact same thing. I went and saw it in the theater, and I was just like, that was just fun. They're simple movies to a degree in terms of it's just a bunch of people talking. And I love writing dialogue. And and then when the DVD came out, there's a Back to the Well documentary on it that is very, very inspiring about him, trying to recapture that glory with the first Clerks by making Clerks 2, and that inspired me as well when it came to filmmaking. So, definitely, yeah, nothing more to say. It still inspires me to this day, both of them. Pulp Fiction, which is one of the posters behind me, my favorite Quentin Tarantino movie, and I love basically all of his movies, but Pulp Fiction was so unique when it came out. It was so different, and it showed what an independent filmmaker could do. He's just a mad genius when it comes to film. It's so well directed. The script, of course, is one of the best scripts ever written in Hollywood, but it's so memorable, the characters, everything else. And again, when I finally saw that when I was younger, I went, that's a film. Like, that's a movie. I want to keep rewatching this because it just inspired me. I didn't understand why I was inspired, but it did. And to this day, it still inspires me. The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. I love Westerns, which may surprise a lot of people, but I really do love Westerns. And The Good and the Bad and the Ugly is still my favorite Western, and probably, it's hard to call it the best Western ever made, but I think it is. You know, it edges out some other ones like Unforgiven, Shane, Magnificent Seven. I'm missing one that I really, really enjoy. Once Upon a Time in the West. I love that one. Another Sergio Leone. He's one of my favorite directors. But The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, it can drag a little bit. It's long, but I mean, it's a spaghetti Western, but one of the greatest movies ever made. And the story is kind of simple, but you remember the characters and even the dialogue and the story of these three guys trying to get this money. And one day I'll review The Man with No Name trilogy. I really would like to rewatch all of them, but it made me just want to go make a Western. You know, like one day I hope I can make a Western because I love them so much, and I hope it can be close to okay, like as brilliant as The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly are. It still is inspiring everyone to this day. Birdman, which another poster that's behind me. I think this is the newest movie on the list, but this film blew me away. I had heard such good things. The trailers had me riveted, and I love that it was a comeback for Michael Keaton, who's one of my favorite actors. I love Edward Norton. I love Emma Stone. Like, the whole cast is. Zach Galifianakis has a great role in it. But the film is so different, and the screenplay is so original. In a time where apparently there's no originality left in Hollywood, which there is. I'm even writing original screenplays. You know, it's just they aren't looking. You know, but Birdman, it's amazing that it won Best Picture. It really is, because it doesn't really fit in with what Hollywood is, or is producing nowadays in the age of Marvel. Birdman stands out. I mean, the fact that it's directed to where it looks like it's all in one shot, which means a lot of scenes go on for 10, 15 minutes straight. That is unheard of. And a lot of people are starting to copy that, which I like, because it makes the scenes seem even more real. And I'll stop there because I'll do a review on it some other time. But the movie reminded me why I want to be a filmmaker, because ideas like that can happen, and you got to run with it and write your ass off and direct it the way you want to, and maybe you'll make something like Birdman. It's just, I can't stop rewatching it, and it just became one of my all-time favorites. Citizen Kane. It might be a little cliche to put this on the list, and I've actually only watched it a couple of times, but you know what? It showed me something important. I wasn't really into like older movies, especially black and white. Wasn't really my bag. And this movie showed me that it doesn't matter how old a film is, it can still inspire, and it can still be better than the majority of the films made in the last 50 years. Because Citizen Kane lives up to the hype. It really does. It is so beautiful. And it's Citizen Kane. It's still considered the greatest movie of all time. I still consider it to be the greatest movie of all time because so much has been taken from it. So much has been learned from it. I learned a lot just watching it. But this is one of my all-time favorite movies because it's Citizen Kane, and I love it, but also because it showed me that it does not matter how old a movie is or if it's in black and white or color. It can still be genius. And I thank it for that. The original Star Wars trilogy. Of course, I'm talking about Star Wars A New Hope, Empire Strikes Back, and Return of the Jedi. I have to pick all three because you have to have all three in there. You have to. But these is still my favorite sci-fi movies. You know, how can you not love them? You know, and I was crazy. I wanted to learn the backstory and see documentaries of how they build the models, how they do the special effects. You know, it just made me curious about how they did what they did and told such a great story with great characters. And how did George Lucas come up with this? But regardless of that, the movies are just entertaining, as all of you know. It's not everyone's cup of tea, but the majority of people. And now it's back. Episode 7 was a lot of fun. Can't wait for 8 and 9. And Star Wars Rogue One is coming out next month, and I can't wait. But the original Star Wars trilogy, I just rewatched them over and over and over and over and over, and it just made me jealous. Like, God, I want to do something like that. Like, it's still inspiring people to this day. And what else can you say? Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, the movie, the original movie. This is the one I said may surprise a lot of you. I didn't watch this when it first came out. I was only 4, but I watched it a few years later. But this movie, I've done a review of it before, so watch that. I reviewed the trilogy and then the animated movie. I haven't done the Michael Bay ones yet because they are terrible. But this, I remember even as a kid watching this and going, how did they make these suits? How did they make the suits? How did they do this? It got me asking questions. And it was one of the first times as a kid I remember asking questions about a movie, like asking my parents, how did they make those suits? And they didn't know. They were tired of me asking. You know, it made me interested in the backstory of film, so I thank it for that. But it's not going to go down as one of the greatest movies ever made, not even close, but it's still a damn good movie. And it's probably my favorite 90s movie because it captures what the 80s were and what the 90s was becoming. But it still entertains me to this day because I'm such a Turtles nut, but I thank it because it made me ask a lot of questions. Beauty and the Beast. Still my favorite. I wanted to put an animated movie on this, and there's so many that I love, but I'm a huge Disney nerd, but Beauty and the Beast is still my favorite. To me, it's still, I can't say it's the best, Disney movie, especially now with like Disney Pixar. They've made some that are probably even better than Beauty and the Beast, but I watched this as a kid a billion times, and the animation, the music, the voice acting, everything, it just made me want to make something like that one day. Something that is animated and really for kids, but it speaks to the masses. It speaks to adults and children. That's a rare type of film, and Disney had a few that were like that in a row, but Beauty and the Beast is definitely the best, and I don't care if I'm a 30-year-old man, I will still watch that shit by myself, because it's Disney, and it's Beauty and the Beast. It's just the best. Little Shop of Horrors. Now, this is my favorite musical of all time. And some of you may be going like, oh, musical, blah, blah. Shut up. I love musicals. I love going to the theater to watch musicals. And I love musical movies. And Little Shop of Horrors is not even close to being one of the best musicals ever. I think it's one of the better musical movies. It's still just one of my favorites. I love it. I love Rick Moranis. Ellen Greene is fantastic as Audrey, and she was the original Audrey, so it was great to have her in the movie. The cast is great. The practical effects at Frank Oz, the direction of Frank Oz, the sets were just beautiful, but the practical effects with Audrey 2, to this day, I still don't know how they did that. How much work went into that. And again, it had me asking questions, like, how is this possible? But besides that, the film is just entertaining as hell. And one day I'll do a review of it, but it's my favorite musical of all time. I love it. The Godfather. Now, it was hard for the longest time. This was my favorite, like, mafia movie, and then Goodfellas took that over. And I didn't want to have Godfather and Goodfellas on this list, but I can't help it, because The Godfather is top 5, probably top 3 best movies of all time, for good reason. The casting, the script, the direction, it was so original. I know it was based off a book, it was adapted off the book, sorry. But it's what filmmaking is supposed to be. And it's one movie that they should never touch, never be remade. It is perfect the way it is. The only imperfection really is the beginning is a little bit slow, and Sonny, when he's beating up a guy, obviously misses the punch. Jesus Christ. The punch. The guy, like, it goes, it's clear as day that he did not hit it. But that's just the risk of filmmaking, and sometimes you don't get another shot, and you just have to go with that shot. And I like that imperfection, that even a movie as brilliant as The Godfather has that. So it doesn't make me feel too bad if I make mistakes in my movies. But The Godfather, I mean, what can you say? It's The Godfather. It's still one of my favorites. And finally, The Princess Bride. And this isn't last for any reason. I had a hard time thinking of this because the majority of the movies that are my favorites I have posters of. I do not have the Princess Bride poster. My roommate does. I actually bought it for him, I believe, for his birthday. And one day, hopefully, I'll have the poster too, because what can you say about The Princess Bride? It has everything. It's a comedy, it's a drama, it's action, it's fantasy. You know, it's one of the best screenplays ever written in Hollywood. William Goldman, you know, he adapted it from his own book, and the characters, the one-liners, the dialogue, the story, the stuff between Fred Savage and the grandfather, Peter Falk, all of it. It's a near perfect film, and it inspires you of how great it is. And every time it's done, I get depressed because I want more. Like, I want a sequel. Give me more Princess Bride. And even though when it came out it didn't do great, it just has become one of the most beloved films in history, like The Wizard of Oz. It's become the Wizard of Oz of our generation. It's been said many times, even by Rob Reiner, the director. And I love it so much. And there you go, my top 20 favorite films. Hopefully this didn't go on for too long, but I figured it'd make for a good 50th or 51st episode or whatever. But next I will actually go back to reviewing films, and I will review John Carpenter's The Fog. I finally watched it, and I'm excited to talk about it, and I'll go ahead and say I'll save that for the Fog review. But anyway, I hope you enjoyed this, and I'll see you guys in the next video, because I got more movies to watch. Take care.